The intergalactic ship Aurora glided through the vastness of space, its sleek hull reflecting the distant light of 1,000 stars. On board, the human delegation, led by Leo, the young and determined envoy, made their way to the galactic summit. Earth had been invited to participate in this historic event, and Leo was chosen as their representative. The entire world watched with bated breath, knowing that their place in the galactic community rested on the outcome of this summit. Leo stood on the observation deck, gazing out into the stars. He had always dreamed of this moment, the chance to represent humanity among the stars. But as much as he felt pride, there was also a sense of trepidation. The Galactic Council was made up of alien species far older and more advanced than Earth, and Leo was just one human among them. He could feel the weight of his responsibility pressing on his shoulders. The door behind him slid open with a soft hiss, and Leo turned to find his assistant, Lieutenant Mara, standing there with a data pad in her hands. "Everything is in order for the summit, Leo," she said, her voice calm yet firm. "But there's something you need to see." Curious, Leo walked over to her and glanced at the data pad. It was a schedule for the summit, but one name stood out to him: Princess Lyra of the Virexian Empire. She was listed as the primary delegate for the Virexian people, a species known for their unmatched intellect and the vast empire they ruled across several star systems. The Virexians were one of the oldest members of the Galactic Council, and Lyra was their crown princess, the most influential person in the empire. Leo felt a flutter of excitement mixed with nerves. He had heard of Princess Lyra before. Her intelligence and beauty were legendary, and her diplomatic skill had earned her respect throughout the galaxy. Meeting her was a momentous occasion, one that could influence the future of humanity's place in the galaxy. Mara noticed his expression. "You're meeting with her tomorrow," she said, her tone light, but with a hint of amusement. "Good luck with that." Leo chuckled, but there was no hiding the nervousness in his smile. "Thanks, Mara. I'll need it." The next day arrived quickly, and Leo found himself standing in the grand hall of the Aurora, waiting for Princess Lyra's arrival. The hall was magnificent, its high ceilings and smooth, curved walls giving it the feel of a palace. Virexians, with their pale blue skin and elegant features, moved around the room, their conversations a hum of quiet authority. Leo stood out among them, his human appearance starkly different from the tall, graceful Virexians. Then, the doors at the far end of the hall opened, and a room fell silent. Princess Lyra stepped into the room. Her skin shimmered like polished moonstone, and her long silver hair cascaded down her back. She wore a flowing robe of dark teal, the color highlighting the elegance of her form. Her eyes, a deep violet, scanned the room with a sharpness that made Leo feel as if she could see right through him. She was regal in every sense of the word, her presence commanding attention from all who surrounded her. Leo felt his heart skip a beat. He had seen images of her before, but nothing prepared him for the reality of her presence. She was stunning, her beauty almost otherworldly. But there was more than just beauty in her gaze. There was intelligence, strength, and something else, something he couldn't quite place. Mara nudged him, snapping him out of his reverie. "Don't freeze up now, Leo," she whispered with a grin. "You're about to meet the most powerful woman in the galaxy." Taking a deep breath, Leo straightened his posture and walked forward to meet the princess. As he approached, Lyra's eyes met his, and for a moment, they just stared at each other, as if measuring the other. Leo had heard that Virexians could read emotions with a single glance, and he wondered what she saw in him. "Greetings, human envoy," Lyra said, her voice smooth and commanding, yet with a subtle warmth. "I am Princess Lyra of the Virexian Empire. It is an honor to meet you." "The honor is mine, Princess Lyra," Leo replied, bowing slightly in respect. He had rehearsed this moment, but now that it was happening, he felt oddly out of place. "Shall we speak in private?" Lyra asked, her eyes flickering toward the quieter section of the hall. She gestured for him to follow, and Leo nodded, stepping beside her. They walked through a corridor lined with holographic images of Virexian history. Leo couldn't help but notice how different everything was from Earth. Everything on this ship felt timeless, almost ethereal. The Virexians seemed to have perfected the art of blending technology with nature, creating a harmony that was both awe-inspiring and intimidating. As they entered a private chamber, Lyra motioned for Leo to take a seat. He hesitated for a moment before sitting down. The room was minimalist, with soft lighting and a large window that offered a view of the stars. "Tell me, Leo," Lyra began, her tone shifting to one of curiosity. "What brings humanity to this summit? You are a young species, yet you are here, representing your planet among some of the oldest races in the galaxy. What do you hope to achieve?" Leo paused for a moment, collecting his thoughts. He had prepared a speech for this moment, but something about Lyra's directness made him want to be more genuine. "We want peace," he said simply. "We want to prove that humanity has more to offer than just weapons or resources. We can bring something to the table that others haven't considered. Our ability to connect, to find common ground, even when it seems impossible." Lyra studied him for a long moment, her violet eyes narrowing slightly. She seemed to be considering his words carefully. "And what of this proposal?" she asked, her voice quiet but sharp. "What exactly do you offer us, Leo?" Leo felt his heart race again. This was the moment he had been dreading, the moment when he had to voice what had been on his mind since he first laid eyes on her. "I propose an alliance," Leo said, his voice steady despite the nerves. "Not just a political one, but a deeper connection, one that goes beyond treaties and negotiations. I propose that you consider me as your partner, Princess Lyra." The words hung in the air, and for a long moment, Lyra was silent. Her eyes widened slightly, her lips parting in surprise. It was clear she hadn't expected this. Her gaze flicked to the window, as if searching for something in the stars. Leo could feel his heart pounding in his chest as he waited for her response. Finally, she turned back to him, her expression unreadable. You are serious?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Leo nodded. "I'm serious." The princess was taken aback, her mind racing. No one had ever made such a proposal to her, and certainly not a human. The audacity of it, the simplicity, it was unlike anything she had ever encountered. For a moment, she could only stare at him in shock. Princess Lyra sat in her chambers, her thoughts racing. The room was quiet, almost too quiet. The only sound was the soft hum of the ship's systems, but it might as well have been a storm raging inside her mind. Leo's words repeated over and over in her head. "I propose that you consider me as your partner, Princess Lyra." She had never expected such a proposal. Virexians, with their long history and advanced civilization, had their ways that were rooted in power, politics, and influence. Proposals between individuals of her rank and status were always about alliances, resources, or strengthening the Empire's position in the galaxy. But Leo's words were different. He wasn't talking about alliances or treaties. He wasn't offering anything in return for her support. He simply offered himself. At first, she thought it must have been some kind of misunderstanding. Perhaps Leo had miscalculated the gravity of his words in front of someone of her stature. Maybe he had intended it as a joke, something to break the ice in an uncomfortable situation. But no, she had seen his eyes when he spoke. They were filled with sincerity. He meant it. Lyra's thoughts raced as she tried to make sense of it all. She stood up and walked to the window, staring out into the endless expanse of space. The stars were distant, cold. Yet, something about the vastness of it all made her feel small and insignificant. She was the princess of the Virexian Empire, one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. She had been trained for diplomacy, for politics, for every situation that might arise. Yet here was a human, a species she had only just begun to understand, proposing something that defied everything she had been taught. She shook her head and sat back down. Was it possible that this human, Leo, had seen something in her that no one else had? Was it possible that, in all her years of politics and power, she had missed the simplest truth? Connection between two beings, regardless of their origins. Lyra closed her eyes, trying to calm her racing mind. She had to understand why Leo would make such an offer. What did he truly want from her? Could he possibly be serious about forming a bond? Something beyond the superficial dealings that were the norm in galactic politics. Her mind wandered to the brief moments they had shared in the hall, when Leo had proposed his idea. He hadn't been like the others. He hadn't looked at her with the same awe or fear that most did. Instead, he had looked at her with something else, something she couldn't name. It wasn't admiration. It wasn't reverence. It was a quiet confidence, as if he truly believed she was capable of. In a way, it scared her. She had spent so many years guarding herself, building walls around her heart and mind. To open up to someone, especially a human, was a dangerous proposition. The Virexian Empire was all about control. Emotions were something to be managed, never indulged. Yet, Leo's words had stirred something in her, a curiosity, a longing, even. "I am serious," Leo had said, his voice steady. The princess's thoughts were interrupted by the soft chime of her communicator. Startled, she glanced at the screen, seeing the face of her chief advisor, Thalin. His expression was unreadable, as always, but she could sense the urgency in his tone. "Your Highness," Thalin said, "we have received an update from the Council. There are concerns about the human and voice proposal. Some believe it could be an attempt to undermine our standing among the other galactic powers." Lyra took a deep breath, pushing her conflicting emotions aside. She had known that her every action would be scrutinized, but hearing it from Thalin made it all the more real. She had to be careful. Politics was a delicate game, and a single misstep could cost her everything. "I'm aware," Lyra replied, her voice cold and calculated. "But I have not yet decided what to do. This proposal, though unexpected, requires careful thought." Thalin's brow furrowed. "Your Highness, I urge you to reconsider. Forming an alliance with a human, especially in such a personal manner, could be seen as a weakness. Our people might see it as a betrayal of tradition." "I understand the risks," Lyra said, her voice now firm. "But I also understand the potential in this. Perhaps it's time we considered something different. Humanity is not the threat we once thought. They are unpredictable, yes, but there is something genuine in their approach. It's worth considering." Thalin was silent for a moment. "I will await your decision, Your Highness." The call ended, leaving Lyra alone with her thoughts once again. Thalin was right in many ways. Alliances were typically made for political gain, not for the sake of personal bonds. But was it possible that Leo's proposal wasn't just another political move? Was it possible that he saw something in her beyond the politics? She wasn't sure. The thought was unsettling, but also strangely comforting. The Virexian Empire had been her world for so long. It had been her duty, her responsibility, to uphold its traditions. But now, Leo's proposal had forced her to question those very traditions. What if there was more to life than the endless cycle of power and control? What if, for once, there was something more important than politics? Sighing, Lyra stood up and walked over to the communication console. She hesitated for only a moment before reaching out to Leo. Her fingers hovered over the controls, unsure of what she was going to say. Would she tell him that she had been thinking about his words all day? That she had never expected him to be so bold, so honest? No, she couldn't. Not yet. But she needed answers. Answers only Leo could give. "I'd like to meet again," she finally said, sending the message to his quarters. Soon. The decision had been made, but it was only the beginning. Lyra knew that this meeting, this conversation, would change everything. She didn't yet know how, but she couldn't deny the curiosity that had taken root inside her. Perhaps, just perhaps, Leo had opened a door that no one else had dared to touch. And for the first time in a long while, Lyra was ready to see where it would lead. The days following the proposal had been a blur for Princess Lyra. Every moment felt like it was charged with anticipation. Yet she could not shake the nagging uncertainty that clung to her thoughts. As much as she tried to focus on the important matters of the Galactic Summit, her mind constantly drifted back to Leo, the young human envoy who had dared to challenge everything she knew about politics, about connection, and even about herself. It had been several hours since she had sent her message to Leo, asking to meet again. Yet, a part of her wondered whether she had made a mistake in reaching out. She had been raised in a world of diplomacy, where alliances were calculated, forged in the heat of political necessity, and never made based on emotion or impulse. This was not how things were done. Humans, to her understanding, were simple, rash creatures, unworthy of such serious consideration. But Leo had thrown that belief into disarray. His words, so simple yet so profound, had unsettled her in ways she couldn't quite explain. She found herself questioning everything she had ever learned about the galaxy, about relationships, and about herself. Lyra sat at her desk in her private chambers aboard the Aurora, the sleek ship that carried the Virexian delegation to the summit. The room was bathed in the soft light of distant stars, their light flickering through the window like a promise of something more. The reports from her advisors lay in front of her, the usual political calculations about trade agreements, military alliances, and diplomatic negotiations. Yet, despite the weight of those responsibilities, her attention was elsewhere. It wasn't the reports she cared about in this moment, but the message she had just sent to Leo. She was pulled from her thoughts by a soft chime at her door. Without waiting for a response, Thalin entered, his usual calm demeanor now tinged with a hint of concern. He was one of her closest advisors and a trusted confidant, but even he could not hide his growing unease. "Your Highness," Thalin began, his voice low, "the Galactic Council has received word of your recent actions. There is speculation among the members regarding the human envoy." Lyra raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. She had expected this. Word would spread quickly through the council, and the reactions would vary. Some would see Leo's proposal as a joke, others would mock it. But there were those, like Thalin, who saw it as a dangerous departure from Virexian tradition. "You've stirred up quite a reaction," Thalin continued. "There are those who believe that forming such a personal bond with a human could destabilize our position among the council. The Virexian people expect you to lead with strength, not sentiment." Lyra's heart tightened. She had heard these concerns before, but now, faced with the reality of the situation, they felt heavier than ever. Her empire, her people, they all depended on her to make the right decisions, to ensure the Virexian legacy endured. Yet she found herself at a crossroads. Could she ignore the weight of her feelings for the sake of tradition, or was this a chance to break free of the constraints she had lived by all her life? "I understand their concerns," she said quietly, her eyes not meeting Thalin's. "But I must also ask myself, why are we so afraid to change? Why is it that every decision we make is driven by power, control, and the desire to maintain our position above all else? What if Leo's proposal is more than just a fleeting moment?" Thalin's expression hardened. "Your Highness, we do not live in a world of fantasy. The galaxy is built on power, and strength is what commands respect. If you allow yourself to be swayed by emotions, by the feelings of one human envoy, how will it look to the rest of the council? They will see it as a weakness. It could undermine everything we've worked for." Lyra sighed, her fingers tracing the edge of the report before her. "I know, Thalin. I know the risks. But it is not weakness to seek something more than endless political games. Humanity, in their own way, has something we do not. They live with purpose, driven by a desire for connection, for understanding. Maybe that's something worth considering." Thalin remained silent for a long moment, his eyes searching her face. Finally, he spoke, his voice low but firm. "I cannot stop you from making your own choices, Your Highness, but I must advise you to tread carefully. The human envoy may be charming, but he is still an unknown quantity. You cannot afford to be distracted by sentimentality." "I will not be distracted," Lyra said, her voice firm. "But I will also not be blind to what lies before me. I have always played the game of politics, Fallon, but this time, I intend to play it differently." Fallon's eyes narrowed. "I hope you know what you're doing, Your Highness. For the sake of your empire, and for your people, I hope this does not lead to disaster." Lyra didn't respond immediately. She didn't need to. Fallon was right, in his own way. The risks were high. But in this moment, she couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that something important was slipping through her fingers, something that could change the course of her future, and the future of the Virexian Empire. "I have sent the envoy a message," Lyra said at last, her voice steady. "I have asked to meet again." Fallon looked startled. "A meeting? With him, alone?" Lyra nodded. "Yes, and I will hear him out. We will speak in private, and I will make my decision from there." "Very well," Fallon said, his tone resigned. "But remember, Your Highness, the Council is watching. You will need to justify your actions. If this is not handled with care, it could spell trouble for your reign." Lyra met his gaze, her eyes filled with a quiet determination. "I understand. But this time, it's not just about politics. It's about something more." As Fallon left her chambers, Lyra sat in silence, staring out at the stars once more. The galaxy was vast, its complexities ever-shifting. But for the first time in her life, she felt as if she were standing on the edge of something new, something that could change everything. And Leo, the human envoy, might just be the key to it all. The days passed in a blur of duty and decision-making, but Lyra could not escape the thought of Leo. The human envoy had become a constant presence in her mind, his simple yet bold proposal echoing in her thoughts at the strangest times. As much as she tried to focus on the responsibilities that came with being the princess of the Virexian Empire, something inside her kept pulling her back to him. She found herself staring out the window of her private chamber, the vastness of space spreading out before her like an endless canvas. The stars, so distant and cold, held no answers, but they had always been there, constant and unchanging. Unlike her world, which had been forever shaped by politics, power struggles, and diplomacy. Yet Leo had offered something else, a way out of all of that. His proposal had been so unlike anything she had ever heard from her people. It had been raw, honest, and without hidden motives. At first, Lyra had dismissed it as a fleeting thought, a moment of weakness on his part. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized that it wasn't just a simple human gesture. It was something deeper. Why had Leo proposed such a thing to her? Was it because he saw something in her that no one else did? Was it because, for once, he wanted to offer something beyond politics? She had always been seen as a figure of power, a princess among many, but no one had ever truly seen her. Not like Leo did. Lyra closed her eyes, taking a slow breath. She could feel the weight of the decision pressing on her chest. The Virexian Empire expected her to be strong, to lead with authority and control. She had been groomed for this role since birth, and the people had come to expect nothing less. But what if she could lead in a different way? What if there was another path, one that didn't rely on power alone? She reached for a data pad on her desk, scrolling through the reports that had been left for her earlier. They were all the same: political maneuvers, trade agreements, military strategies, all things she had dealt with countless times. But as her eyes scanned the words, they began to blur together. She wasn't reading anymore. Her mind was elsewhere, back to Leo, back to his proposal. The thought of forming a bond with a human, something so personal, was a dangerous one. It would be seen as a weakness, a failure to uphold the traditions of her people. The council would never accept it. But there was a part of Lyra that didn't care, a part of her that had spent years in the shadows of the Virexian Empire's power, wondering what else was out there, wondering if there was more to life than the endless cycle of politics and control. As she pondered this, the doors to her chamber slid open, and Fallon stepped inside. His expression was as neutral as ever, but there was an unmistakable tension in the way he held himself. Lyra had known him for years, and she could read him well enough to know that something was bothering him. "Your Highness," Felin said, bowing slightly, "there has been another development regarding the human envoy." Lyra turned her gaze toward him, the weight of her thoughts still heavy on her mind. "What is it?" "Leo has requested a formal meeting with the council," Felin continued. "He wishes to speak not only to you, but to the entire council. His message is clear. He intends to make his proposal public." Lyra's heart skipped a beat. She had expected him to take action. But this was more than she had anticipated. Leo was not just talking about a personal connection between the two of them. He was taking his proposal to the heart of the Phyrexian Empire itself. "I see," Lyra replied, her voice steady despite the storm brewing inside her. "And what do you suggest we do?" Felin hesitated for a moment. "I advise caution. If we allow this meeting, it will send a message that we may not be ready to send. The council will see it as a challenge to our authority." Lyra sighed, rising from her seat and walking toward the large window. The stars outside seemed distant, unreachable. She could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on her once more. The galaxy was a vast and complicated place, filled with power plays and alliances, and yet here she was, facing a choice that had nothing to do with power or politics. "I am aware of the risks, Felin," she said softly, her voice almost a whisper, "but I cannot ignore what has been stirred within me. This is not just about politics. It's about something more." Felin watched her for a moment, his expression unreadable. "If you choose this path, Your Highness, there is no going back. The council will never forgive you for this." "I know," Lyra replied, her voice firm now. "But sometimes, in order to move forward, one must take a step into the unknown. I have been bound by tradition for too long. I can't help but wonder what it would be like to choose something different." Felin's gaze softened, and for the first time, he seemed to hesitate. "If this is what you truly want, Your Highness, I will support you. But I must remind you, once again, of the stakes. The Empire, the Council, and the future of your reign are all in play." "I understand," Lyra said. "But I also understand that sometimes the greatest strength lies in vulnerability. I've spent my life hiding behind walls, behind power. Perhaps it's time to let go." Felin bowed again, his face a mixture of respect and concern. "As always, Your Highness, I will stand by your side." As he left the room, Lyra remained standing by the window, her mind swirling with possibilities. The stars outside were no longer just distant lights. They represented the future, the unknown, and the choice she had to make. Leo's proposal was not just a challenge to tradition. It was a challenge to everything she had ever known. It was a chance to break free from the expectations of her people, to find something real, something human. But could she really take that step? Could she truly walk away from the power and control she had spent her life cultivating? Lyra sat in the council hall, the grand room echoing with the voices of the galaxy's most powerful leaders. The hum of conversation filled the air, but it felt distant, like background noise to the storm that was brewing inside her. Today the council would convene, and Lyra knew that the topic of Leo's proposal would be at the forefront. The human envoy had made it clear. He wasn't backing down. He had requested a formal meeting with the council, and now Lyra was left to face the consequences of her own indecision. The council chamber was a vast, circular room, its walls lined with ancient tapestries depicting the history of the Phyrexian Empire. The alien representatives from various parts of the galaxy had gathered, their eyes fixed on Lyra as she entered. The weight of their gaze was heavy, but she couldn't afford to show any signs of hesitation. She had to maintain control, to show that she was still the powerful princess they all expected her to be. Lyra took her seat at the head of the table, her mind racing. She could feel the tension in the room, the quiet anticipation of what was to come. She had always been a master of diplomacy, using her intelligence and grace to navigate the complicated web of galactic politics. But this was different. Leo had turned everything upside down. His proposal wasn't just about a political alliance. It was about something more, something personal. And now, she had to decide whether to stand firm in the world of power and politics or take a leap into the unknown. The council meeting began, and Lyra forced herself to focus. The discussions were predictable: trade routes, military strategies, and political maneuvering. But as the hours passed, her mind kept drifting back to Leo. His simple words, his quiet confidence, had left an impression on her that she couldn't shake. What if he was right? What if there was more to this galaxy than just power and control? Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the moment arrived. Leo, the human envoy, was escorted into the council chamber. He walked confidently, his eyes scanning the room as he made his way to the center. The room fell silent, all eyes on him. It was rare for a human to step foot in this chamber, let alone to be given the floor to speak before the council. Yet here he was, a single human, standing before some of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. Lyra watched him closely, her heart beating faster as the moment unfolded. She had known this would happen, but seeing him standing there made it all too real. He wasn't just a representative of Earth anymore. He was something more, something that had become impossible to ignore. Leo cleared his throat and addressed the council. "Esteemed leaders of the Galactic Council, I come before you not as a mere envoy, but as a representative of humanity's potential. I know that many of you see us as small, insignificant beings in the grand scale of the galaxy. But I ask you to consider this. What if humanity has something more to offer than just resources, trade, or military power? What if we have the ability to forge connections that transcend political alliances?" Lyra felt her breath catch in her throat. His words were direct, simple, but they carried weight. He wasn't just speaking to the council, he was speaking to her, to everything she had come to understand about the universe. She could feel the eyes of the council on her, waiting for her response. But she was lost in thought, her mind swirling with conflicting emotions. Leo continued, his voice steady. "I propose a partnership, not just between our governments, but between us as individuals. I understand that this might seem outlandish, but I believe that forming a bond based on trust and understanding could benefit us all. It's a chance for something deeper, something more meaningful than just political agreements." Lyra's heart raced as she listened to him speak. He wasn't just asking for an alliance. He was offering something completely new, something that no one had ever dared to propose before. And yet, as much as she wanted to dismiss it, she found herself intrigued. His sincerity was undeniable. There was no hidden agenda, no desire for power or control. He was simply offering a chance for a connection. The room was silent as Leo finished speaking, his eyes scanning the council members. No one spoke for several moments, the weight of his words hanging in the air. Then, one by one, the council members began to react. "The human envoy is out of his mind," said one representative, a tall alien with green skin. "This is not how the galaxy works. We do not form bonds based on trust and understanding. We form them based on mutual benefit." Another council member, a large, armored being, spoke up. "This is a dangerous proposal. We cannot allow a human to dictate terms to the most powerful empire in the galaxy. If we allow this, what message does it send to the rest of the galaxy?" Lyra's heart sank as she listened to the objections. The council was reacting exactly as she had expected. They saw this as a threat to their power, a challenge to the way things had always been done. But as the voices of dissent grew louder, Lyra found herself feeling a strange sense of calm. "I have heard your objections," she said, her voice cutting through the noise. "But I believe we must consider something else. Perhaps humanity has something we do not, something that could change the way we approach the future. Leo's proposal may be unconventional, but that does not make it invalid." The room fell silent once again as the council members turned their attention to Lyra. Her words were bold, unexpected. She had never been one to go against the grain, to challenge the council in such a direct manner. But in that moment, She knew that this was the right path. She couldn't ignore the possibilities that Leo's proposal represented. This was more than politics. This was about something deeper, something real. I have made my decision. Lyra continued, her voice strong and unwavering. We will meet again, Leo, and we will explore what this partnership means. I am willing to take that first step. There was a moment of stunned silence before the council members began to murmur among themselves. Lyra didn't care. She had made her choice. The future of the Virexian Empire was no longer just about power. It was about connection. And for the first time, she felt something she had never experienced before: hope. The days following Lyra's decision were filled with uncertainty. The council's response had been mixed. Some were openly defiant. Others whispered their doubts behind closed doors. Yet, Lyra stood firm in her resolve. Her decision to meet with Leo again, to explore the possibility of an alliance, had sent ripples through the Virexian Empire. But as she walked through the halls of the Aurora, Lyra could feel the weight of the galaxy's expectations pressing down on her shoulders. The future of her people, her empire, rested on the choices she made in these next few moments. Leo's proposal had shaken the foundations of everything she had known. It wasn't just about a political alliance. It was about something deeper, something that transcended power and control. But could it truly be possible? Could something so simple, so personal, really change the course of history? She wasn't sure. But for the first time, she felt a sense of freedom, a pull toward something different. And that, in itself, was something worth exploring. Lyra stood before the communication console in her private chamber, preparing for the meeting. Her hands rested lightly on the smooth surface, her mind focused. She had spent years planning every move, calculating every decision. But this was different. This was not something that could be planned or controlled. It was a leap of faith, and she was ready to take it. The console chimed, and Lyra's heart skipped a beat. She had not expected the human envoy to be so punctual. Her fingers hovered over the console as she pressed the button to initiate the connection. Princess Lyra. Leo's voice came through clearly, steady and warm. His image appeared on the screen, human, confident, yet there was a softness in his eyes that made Lyra's heart flutter, something she had not expected. I'm glad we could meet again. Lyra nodded, her voice calm as she replied. I appreciate you making the time, Leo. We have much to discuss. There was a pause, and for a brief moment, neither spoke. Lyra could see the curiosity in Leo's eyes, but he waited for her to begin. She had known this moment would come, but now that it was here, she wasn't sure where to start. Finally, she spoke, her voice steady. I've had time to think about your proposal, Leo, and I have to admit, I've been uncertain about what to do. The galaxy, my people, they all expect me to make decisions based on power, on what will strengthen our position. But what if there's more to this life than that? What if there's more than just political alliances and military might? Leo's expression softened, and his voice was filled with understanding. I believe there is more. I've always believed there is, but I'm not asking you to abandon your people or your duty. I'm asking you to consider something different, a partnership based on trust, respect, and the idea that together we can accomplish more than we ever could alone. Lyra studied him for a moment. His words were simple, but they carried weight. She could see the sincerity in his eyes. There was no hidden agenda, no ulterior motive. He wasn't asking for power or for control. He was simply offering something she had never been offered before. A chance at something real, something human. I've spent my entire life trying to lead with strength, with authority, Lyra said, her voice softer now. But I've never truly connected with anyone. I've always kept my distance, kept my emotions in check. I've seen my role as a leader, as a ruler, and that's all I've ever been. But I don't know if I can keep doing this alone. Leo's face softened, and his voice was gentle. You don't have to do it alone. I'm not asking you to give up your position, your strength. I'm asking you to take a step towards something different. Something that could change everything. Together, we could build something that transcends all the boundaries of power and politics." Lyra closed her eyes for a moment, letting his words sink in. She had always thought she understood what it meant to be a leader. But now she wasn't so sure. What if she had been wrong all along? What if there was another way to lead, one that wasn't based on control, but on trust? "I've never considered an alliance like this," she admitted, her voice quiet. "But I am willing to try. I want to see where this could lead. We've both taken risks to get to this point, and perhaps that's the only way forward, to take a leap and see where it takes us." Leo smiled, and there was a sense of relief in his expression. "I'm glad to hear that, Princess Lyra. I truly believe this could work. But we need to take the next step together." For the first time since they had met, Lyra felt a sense of hope rising within her. She had been trapped in a world of political games and strategies. But now, she was opening herself to something new. It wasn't going to be easy. The council would resist, her people would question her choices. But in this moment, Lyra realized that she had to trust herself. She had to trust Leo. "Then we move forward," Lyra said, her voice resolute. "We'll see where this path leads. Together." The connection ended, but Lyra didn't feel the same weight she had before. Instead, there was a sense of clarity, a quiet confidence that had been missing for so long. She wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in her life, she was ready to face it head-on. And as the stars outside the window shone brightly, Lyra knew that this was only the beginning. The galaxy was vast, and there were many challenges ahead. But with Leo by her side, she believed they could overcome anything. Together, they would forge a new path, one that would change the galaxy forever. The days following Lyra's decision felt different. There was a new energy aboard the Aurora, a quiet anticipation that seemed to hang in the air. The Virexian Empire's princess had made a choice that no one had expected. And though the council continued to question her motives, Lyra could feel that something was beginning to shift. She was no longer just playing the game of power and control. Now she was opening herself to a new path, one that, though uncertain, promised something deeper than political alliances and military might. Lyra stood at the observation window in her private chamber, watching as the stars drifted by. The vastness of space had always fascinated her, but now it seemed different. It was no longer just a backdrop to her duties. It was a symbol of the possibilities that lay ahead. For the first time, she could feel the weight of her decisions shifting, as if the galaxy itself was responding to the changes she had made within herself. Leo had been right about one thing. There was more to the universe than politics. There was connection. And now, for the first time, Lyra was ready to embrace it. Her thoughts were interrupted by the soft chime of her communicator. She glanced at the screen, and her heart skipped a beat. It was a message from Leo. "Princess Lyra," the message began, his voice warm and steady. "I know that this is a lot to ask, but I believe we are on the right path. The council will resist, I know that. But together, we can show them that there is another way. Let's meet tomorrow. I'll be waiting." Lyra smiled softly to herself. It was the confidence in Leo's words that had drawn her to him in the first place. He didn't just speak with authority. He spoke with belief, with the quiet assurance that anything was possible if they were willing to take the leap. She quickly composed a response. "I agree, Leo. Tomorrow, we meet. Let's see what we can build together." As the message sent, Lyra took a deep breath, feeling a sense of peace settle over her. She had made her choice, and she wasn't going to turn back. She was no longer the princess who relied solely on power and control. She was a leader who believed in the strength of trust and the power of connection. The next day arrived quickly, and with it, the moment that would set the course for the future of the Virexian Empire, and for Lyra herself. She walked into the council chamber with her head held high, her steps firm and confident. The room was filled with the usual faces of the council, but today There was an unfamiliar energy in the air. The council members were watching her closely, as if they were waiting to see what she would do next. Lyra took her seat at the head of the table, her posture regal, but her mind focused on the task at hand. She had come to realize that her role was not just to rule her people, but to guide them towards something greater, something beyond the power struggles and the endless negotiations. Leo entered the room a few moments later, his presence as calm and composed as always. He met Lyra's gaze with a look of quiet determination, and for a brief moment, their eyes locked, each understanding the weight of what they were about to undertake. The room fell silent as Lyra rose to address the council. The tension in the room was palpable, but she was no longer intimidated. She had made her decision, and now it was time to act. "Council members," she began, her voice clear and steady. "I know that my decision to meet with Leo and consider his proposal has caused some uncertainty. But I ask you to listen to what I have to say, because this is not just about one human envoy and one princess. This is about the future of the Virexian Empire and the future of the galaxy." She paused, allowing her words to sink in. The council members exchanged glances, but no one interrupted her. Lyra could see the skepticism in their eyes, but she was undeterred. This was her moment, and she was going to make it count. "We have lived for centuries with the belief that strength, control, and power are the only things that matter," Lyra continued. "But I am starting to believe that there is another way. I believe that humanity, with all their flaws and imperfections, can offer us something that we have been missing. The ability to connect, to understand, to trust." There was a murmur among the council members, but Lyra raised her hand.